I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to Ovicast, the Chocolate Sheep podcast. Each episode we bring latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. In this week's episode we catch up with Brian Nicholson, who farms just outside of Johnstown in County Kilkenny. Brian runs a large-scale sheep flock and is a participant CPT flock with Sheep Ireland. We start off with Brian discussing sales of the lamb crop this year and his plans for finishing the remaining lambs this autumn. We move on to discuss the breeding plan for Brian's farm, and he takes us through the various breeding groups, from the commercial flock of 290 ewes to the ewes that will be AI'd and naturally mated as part of the Central Progeny Test Programme with Sheep Ireland. We discuss the various breeds being used and how he manages this aspect of the flock. We move on to discuss his graze management for the autumn and how he uses forage rape to winter part of his flock during the year, and how it fits into his overall system. We finish up discussing why he's moved away from joining new lambs to lamb of 1 year old, instead opting to run them dry, and how he uses these as a management group the following year. We start off, however, Brian gives us an update on how lamb sales have been going this year.
Yeah, at the moment there with about 65% of the lambs gone off the farm. We've just shy of 400 lambs left to be moved off the farm now at this stage.
And you started supplementing the ram lambs. That was tradition with you, Brian, in September. I assume you kept that practice up.
Yeah, we started there just about 3 weeks ago. After a load of lambs went to the factory, I just found that the kill outs weren't just quite good enough compared to what I've been getting before that, and I introduced a bit of creep feed at that stage. So I did.
What kind of level are you going in with the lambs, Brian?
They're getting approximately a half kilo per head per day at this stage now, so they are.
So it's just helping you get that bit of cover on them and keeping them moving.
Yes, it's just getting that little bit of extra energy into them. I suppose there's plenty of grass there, but it probably doesn't have the same bang at this time of the year as it does earlier on in the year during the summer and that.
No, and look, you're watching you feed them, and like the ewe lambs, are you supplementing them at the moment? Ones for sale?
Not just yet. We'll probably start in the next week to 10 days, giving them the bit of creep feed there, so we will just to move them on. I was letting them grow into a bit more of a frame before I started, rather than getting them fat before they're fit.
Probably a bit less of a challenge with ewe lambs from this time of the year on. Anyway, the ram lambs, I suppose, a slightly different issue. But
yeah.
Look, I suppose at this stage, Brian, your focus has really shifted to the breeding season, and it's slightly different on your farm than some. You're involved with Sheep Ireland as a CPT flock. You might just set the scene for me for a moment. Like, your numbers going to the ram this year, we'll go through the different groups afterwards.
Yeah, so this year now we have just over 900 ewes going to the ram. They'll be split up into varying different groups then according to different breeding dates.
And them ewes, like the base of that ewe a couple of years back was Belclare Texel. You introduced a bit of easy care in it. Are we looking at Nelson the flock at the moment?
Yeah, well, that's predominantly the same breed now within the Sheep Ireland part of the flock. There we'll have some Suffolks coming in on that there, and there'll be some Clins as well. Okay,
so that's coming into the Sheep Ireland, but we might just explain then the different mating groups or how it works on the farm. So you've been a CPT flock for a long number of years. Not all of your ewes are going CPT. So how does your commercial end of it run separate than the CPT flock?
Yeah, so I suppose there's about 290 ewes there that are part of my natural service flock, my commercial ewes. They be predominantly a Texel Belclare cross, kind of more so on the Texel side, so they'll be crossed with Belclares. And then after that, then we move into the CPT side of things.
So your own ewes, the rams are out with them at the moment.
Yeah, they went out there the 1st of October, which will give me a due date there around the start of March sometime.
I suppose some of the background, maybe to them going slightly earlier, to have that batch out of the way before you get into your CPT ewes.
Yeah. So I suppose they are that little bit earlier to where I'd like, but I have 600 Joes coming to lamb down then just after them, so I need that extra little bit of space around the yard. So it just gives a bit of shed space, and that if the weather is bad when the big batch are lambing down, we have the ability to house ewes and lambs for that little bit longer, just to get over a spell of bad weather.
And like, just to set the scene, and I know it's slightly different this year, but the 600 Joes, like, that's a synchronized AI flock. But it was in previous years synchronized AI. That's a very hectic week during lambing.
Yeah, so with that batch there, we can have up to 80 or 100 Joes lambing a day. So if the weather's not great, things back up fairly quick around the place.
Pens become a premium. Look, at this year's somewhat different. There's different types of AI going in. You have a bit of natural service going in. You might just explain what's going to happen with them 600 Joes that's in the CPT this year.
Yeah, so this year the Sheep Ireland Joes, there's 3 different batches, so to speak. We have 150 there. They're going to be cervical AI now mid-October. There's then 300 which will be mated naturally, so that they'll be in 3 groups of 100 with a number of rams out with each group. And then the 21st of October thereabouts, we'll have the last 160 will be laparoscopic mated. So there's a bit more of a spread on it compared to other years, which it'll take a little bit of pressure off in the spring, but it draws it out that little bit more as well.
Like, just for part of explanation for somebody who might be familiar with, like, they're AI'd, so you can use a number of sires can be used across multiple CPT flocks.
Yeah. So the idea is that the same rams are used between all the farms in the CPT, and you're ruling out, I suppose, individual farm management, because the traits of the rams will come through, and you know, it kind of rules out the human side of the flocks.
The flocks will all be linked. So I suppose it's an important element of that commercial data that's feeding into that index. And
yeah,
I suppose, like, to put in context, that it's changed how you do things around breeding, and obviously around lambing time it's quite intense at certain periods. Just for anyone that hasn't gone into them numbers of AI, Brian, like, it's a very busy day on the farm when that happens.
Yeah, so the days that we're AIing, I suppose it started a fortnight beforehand with sponging, and then 2 days beforehand we have to pull sponges, and they have to be pulled in relation to time that they're going to be AI'd then 2 days in 2 days time. So there's a lot of timekeeping and record keeping to keep things in line and make sure the different groups don't mix then prior to the day that we're AIing. And then on the day AI, and then rams are jumped and fresh semen is collected for the AIing of the ewes.
So you have a busy day on that day to go through them kind of numbers.
Yeah. We'll start early, and I suppose we're not too bad this year. We don't have the same numbers as we would have been doing another year. Other years we were doing up to 300 in a day. So it's a little bit easier this year compared to other years.
It'll still be all hands on deck though.
Oh yeah.
The natural mating, Brian, this year with them groups. So you mentioned you have 300 Joes going for natural mating. I imagine it's 3 or more sires going out with them.
Yeah. So there's a mixture of ram lambs and hoggets going out with them. So that they'll be divided up, and the rams will be with them for one mating cycle, and after that then we can start grouping them up back into larger groups then, just to pick up repeats and that at that stage, but also to help manage grass then as well.
Yeah, no, and like just maybe to finish that point, like it simplifies management certainly for you. Maybe takes a little bit of pressure off at Leamington so far as the spreads it out. But them lambs will be identified or linked back to their sires, them with genotype in spring.
Yeah. So, I mean, apart from anything else, I suppose with the EID tagging on the O's, we have the rams that have been let out to them, identified that there was such and such a ram or 3 rams with this yo for the mating time. But then EID, we're using DNA and the tags of the lambs at birth, so the lambs are being genotyped, and that's picking out the sires and dams then as well.
And the other thing, look, there'll be certainly something interesting coming out of that as well, to see how well an individual ram actually performs in that group of 100 ewes. Like we've seen in other farms before, some rams are more active than others.
Yeah. No, that'll be one of the big things there. See, how good rams will work.
So the ram breed's going out with them again. It's obviously your foundation is still Belclare Texel. What all else is going out with them ewes?
Yeah, so the other rams going out there will be Suffolks and Clint.
And like you mentioned there, after that first cycle, grouping up. So what happens, or when do you pull on them? And similarly with the ewes as they aid, you put in a cover ram afterwards.
Yeah, so I have another team of rams that get joined there later on, just to add extra power in that. So there's Texels there and Charlies will come in for kind of mopping up repeats there afterwards. And they're on the terminal side, so because they're that lambing that little bit later than the start of them, they have a good chance of catching up then with the other lambs.
And the replacements are coming from the aid ones and the single sire mate ones, not from the...
Yeah.
So look, it leaves grass and management a bit easier. I suppose just in terms of that, like, what's the plans for closing up on the farm, or how do you manage them post-mating?
Yeah, so closing up there now at the moment, well, it's a bit all over the place, I suppose, at the moment, but the plan would be by kind of the 20th of October to have about 15% of the farm closed. And then kind of moving on, then I'd be hoping to have 60% closed by late November, and then early December I'd be getting close to 100%. At that stage, then the sheep will be targeted towards grazing forage crops that have gone in on tillage ground on the farm.
You've been doing that for the last number of years. May you just explain to us how that works in your system?
Yeah, so I suppose I'll have about 30 acres of forage rape there, so that it's a great way of keeping yours outdoors that little bit longer. It's winter hardy. I'll probably target that with the CPT group of ewes. Keep them together and keep the natural service separated, so they'll get the last of the grass. After that, then they'll go to the shed, and the CPT will be left out till they've grazed that. So they'll be going in there kind of mid-November onto that. No, mid-December, I should say. And they'll be grazed on that till possibly mid-January, late January. It'll depend on kind of weather, really. So it will, if we have good weather there, we'll get that little bit longer out of it. And I'll strip graze it there. I'll give, depending on the weather, if the weather's bad, it'll be day allocations. If it's good dry weather, we can give kind of 3-4 day allocations there.
So you're roughly going in on that crop, Brian, 2 weeks or so post mating when the rams are lifted.
Yeah. That's the plan. They'll go in there at that stage, so they will, and they'll be scanned then in early January.
And that's fitted in with your tillage rotation over that year.
Yeah, it fits in nicely with the tillage rotation there. I'm growing seed barley on contract there, so we're getting the barley out early, and we're able to get the rape in there. We're getting the barley harvested there in early mid-August, going well, and we have the rape established before we get into September, which is nearly essential to having a decent crop.
In the last number of years, like, you've moved away from mating your ewe lambs on the farm. Obviously, look, from listening to the earlier part of that, you're busy in March most years. I suppose the stubbles also provides a place for them in spring if needs be.
Yeah. I suppose there's a couple of things there. While I was building the flock, I found mating the ewe lambs was essential there, because as I was increasing ewe numbers, I was taking lambs out of the system that I wasn't getting paid for, so I needed as many lambs as I could within the system. At this stage now, flock number is up, but you'd be lambing the ewe lambs at the tail end of what is a very busy period, and it's just to have the energy and that to keep a proper eye on them at that stage. So I'm not doing that anymore, but they actually work well in they form a kind of a flying mob during the summer and the spring to go around behind the ewes and lambs just to clean out paddocks that ewes and lambs move off in time, and the ewe lambs come in and they'll do the last bit of cleaning out, that there's not the same pressure put onto the ewes.
No, they have an advantage, so they have in different terms. Brian, you have a busy month ahead of you. It was good getting insight from what's going to happen on the farm. Look, thanks very much for coming on.
No problem at all.
Okay, we're going to finish up at this point. It was good catching up with Brian. I'd like to thank him again for giving up his time to be with us. It's great to see the rams being evaluated in a commercial environment like Brian's, and how that information then feeds into our index, as well as Brian's overall plans for managing the flock this autumn. That's it for me for this episode. Again, for any updates on the sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Chocolate Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and listen in to any of our episodes.